And turns out that apparently the Home Office fears that the number of migrants who are going to be deported on the first Rwanda flight, should this thing ever take off. July now is going to be Easter, then it was going to be spring, now it's July. Apparently it could be as few as 10 people. Charlie, I remember that first Rwanda flight that sat on the runway, all eyes on it, you know, everyone on their flight tracker, and it had basically just one poor soul on it.
Yes, and I think, look, the people of the country and your listeners want to sort of understand why the flights haven't sort of taken off. And it's been for far too long that there have been these kangaroo courts, I think, or these injunctions where, you know, at the dead of night, judges get out of bed and block those flights taking place. That's now, hopefully, under the Rwanda bill that got passed through not so long ago, that has now come to an end. So, you know, when those flights are ready to take off, when the people or people that have come into this country legally have been processed and have been deemed determined for Rwanda, those flights will get off the ground, as the Prime Minister says, in about 10 to 12 weeks.
But nobody will be on them, Charlie, and this is the point. This legislation, the Safety of Rwanda Act, was supposed to stop people being able to say, I can't go to Rwanda because whatever, you know, I'm not going to be safe there because, you know, drop-down menu of options. But it turns out, apparently, that they're planning to use various elements of, guess what, the European Convention of Human Rights. Of course they are. One of the reasons they want to sort of give, or these are the immigration lawyers, want to give their clients to use, there's two. One is my mental health, you know, that old chestnut. And the other is, I'm a fan of protest. And Rwanda doesn't look kindly on people who protest against the government. I mean, what on earth? Which migrants are going to suddenly turn up in Rwanda, buy themselves a Corex board and start marching the streets and demand the resignation of Paul Kagame? It's mad.
Yeah, I can't see that happening myself, but it was the pyjama injunctions I was looking for rather than a kangaroo court earlier on. But that's where, you're right, you know, people can claim all kinds of things which prevents those flights taking place. That has now hopefully come to an end. I mean, it's important to think I think that the Home Office doesn't recognise that there'll only be 10 people on those flights. But as you say, there was a flight where there was only one or two individuals on not so long ago. So we just have to wait and see. It's obviously been a very, very difficult process. But I think the point remains that, look, you know, whatever you think about Rwanda, now, I personally would rather us be in a situation where we don't have the Rwanda scheme. I think many people...
Why do you not...
Because I would have liked to have stood out with the problem many, many years ago.
Before they arrive on these shores,
Totally. It's been a successive failure of governments, which has led to us now having to reach for the extreme, which is, you know, deporting people, putting them on planes, sending them to third countries. Now, I would like to see more returns agreement. That is something that is coming down the stream. But the problem has become so great where there are, you know, 50,000, I think, people that came into the UK illegally in 2022. That was down to 30,000 in 2023. You want to see those numbers continue to fall. But the reality is that is still far too many thousands of people. So when you have such an extreme situation, such is illegal migration into the UK, as it is across the whole of Europe, you've got to reach for an extreme measure. So that's why I think the Rwanda scheme is important.
It seems to me, almost by sheer accident, I don't think it was remotely by design, that we've actually sort of cobbled together a return agreement with the EU without their permission, which is essentially encouraging the people who have entered our country illegally to cross the border into the Republic of Ireland. Perhaps the solution is to build a really gnarly, big, sort of Bibby Stockholm-style detention centre right on the border and say, if you don't like your accommodation, you can just walk 10 metres south, and guess what? You're back in the EU. That would be my solution to the problem. But talking about... these legal challenges.
But can I just note, on that point, I think you're absolutely right, because what people are saying, and this has been dismissed by other commentators, but, you know, you've got to only watch other, you know, broadcasts and where people have actually gone to the border between the north and the south and asked, you know, migrants, you know, why are you making that journey? Why are you moving from Northern Ireland to the Republic? Because they say they don't want to be deported to Rwanda. So Rwanda is, I'm afraid, for those that don't like the scheme or criticise it, it is a deterrent. People do not want to go to Rwanda. And so the answer is, if you don't want to go to Rwanda, you don't risk making that journey, you don't come into the UK.
Yeah. Oh, frankly, I agree. And frankly, these people should go back to the EU because they've traipsed across the EU's open borders. I'm pretty sure that this has been largely condoned by the EU. They've been quite happy to see that happen, so they can go back to the EU, who should have kept them in the first place. But talking about legal challenges before we take a quick break, and I mean, these always are based on the ECHR, and there's been this huge tug of war, like there was over Brexit in the Conservative Party, about whether or not got, we should stay in the convention, and the sort of soft Tory line is, oh, well, we should stay in it and reform it from the inside. Britain helped write the whole thing. But then I look at France, who just decide not to follow it and, ignore it when they want to. Nothing happens. Why don't we do that?
Well, I think, it's a perfectly good question, and it's a question that people would probably ask, when we were within the EU, why didn't we just throw our weight around a bit more? Why didn't we act like France and Italy, who, decree all these laws but actually don't accept them themselves? Why are we always the taker rather than sort of flexing our muscles a bit more? Legitimate question to ask, but I do think there is a case to always being around the table, reforming things from within. I think NATO needed the biggest shake-up, and Donald Trump was able to provide that in terms of getting other EU partners to commit their better spending to GDP in terms of their defence spending. That's an organisation that's lasted for a very long time. It can be reformed, but it can continue to operate. And I think the same with the ECHR. We should perhaps stay and criticise it or challenge it a bit more, make it fit for 2024 and for everybody.
I used to be the school of thought of leave it. I'm now in the school of thought as just ignore it. What actually happens if you break international law? Nothing, as far as I can tell. Look, have you got the answer to that question? Do you go to sort of international law prison? Is that what happens? Who knows?